Well, g'day, Bomber fans. How about this? We have a massive game of footy this weekend. Essendon are taking on the Bulldogs, one of the best teams in the competition this year. This is where it really gets real. We've done well to get wins against teams we should be beating. The Sydney win was really good. Now we've got a real test against a team that many think, are premiership contenders, but also a team that many think could do a bit of a number on us. So, yeah, interesting game of footy. Big preview coming up, but first some votes from the Sydney game. Alrighty, votes. Let me tell you, insanely tight count. It seems pretty much everyone agreed that these three were the best. They all got, they dominated the votes. They were all within 10 of each other. They got the coaches' votes too. McGrath gets the most, 5 combined. Reid got 4. Nick Martin got 3 combined. And the role player, Jackson Pryor, got it from me. And the Rising Star nominee, Nate Caddy, gets it from you, just ahead of Old Gold. The overall tally, no movement right up the top with merit. But in second place, look at this, Zach Reid. He has overtaken Sam Durham, who stays in third. In fourth, we've got Andy McGrath, Caldwell, Martin, and Wright not far off them. And then rounding out the top 10, we've got Draper, Dersma, and Archie Perkins. Pleasing top 10. Lots of young players, lots of role players. You love to see it. Keep it up. All right, Essendon and the Doggies. Weird matchup. This is always a team that Essendon fans are a little bit scared of. The Dogs just seem to enjoy playing us. We have won 2 of the last 5, but we've won 2 of the last 11. So, yeah, some of those games you can't even classify as wins for the Dogs. They were just demolition jobs. 2019, that 104-point game where they kicked 20 or something goals in a row. The 2021 elimination final. So yeah, they've owned us a bit in the last decade. But as we saw last year, history doesn't mean diddly squat. What really matters is where the teams are at now. And both are going all right, or both are going well, I'd say. The Bombers are 9th on the ladder, 5 wins from our last 6 games. The Dogs, they're looking really good. They're winning some unreal games of footy. Even the games they lose, they're impressive in. They're flying. They're 6th on the ladder, but in my eyes, they're looking like a top 4 team. So yeah, it's going to be a bloody tough game of footy for the Bombers. We play the Firing Dogs, a team who love to beat us. That is what makes the Dogs favourites in this game. But, as the North and Brisbane game proved to us, anything can happen in a round of footy. I'm excited. This is a massive test. There is every chance the Dogs go out and have their way, but they probably should if you look at where these teams are at. They're pushing for a flag. We're rebuilding with injuries. I would love nothing more than to just see the boys go out against all odds and put up a real fight. That is what I'm looking for. I'm not really focused on wins and losses in a game like this where we're at. I'd love a win, but I'd love a fight too. So yeah, I guess the question now is, how worried should we be about the Bulldogs? All right, well, after Essendon, the team that I watch the most is the Bulldogs. My sister's a big fan of them. Shout out to her. So even on last Saturday, I was watching the Bulldogs in Darwin instead of the Showdown, which is wild. So I'm probably more familiar with the Dogs over most, or probably any team in the comp bar Essendon. And from watching almost every game of theirs this year, yeah, I'm scared. They've looked really good this year, guys. And the thing that really worries me about this game, because, you can be scared of good teams, but this is the Bulldogs score. So we've been really great down back lately. A big part of that is our defensive setup. Another big part, and I'm sorry to say, but it is our opponents. The teams we've played lately haven't been high-scoring teams. And that isn't me discounting our efforts. I think we've been great. But when we look at, the teams we've played that are high-scoring this year, Adelaide, Hawthorn, Collingwood, they've all put triple figures on us. And the Bulldogs, after Adelaide, are the second highest scoring team in the comp. Even without those key players in the forward line, they still do serious damage on the scoreboard. That is what really worries me about this game more than others. We're going to have to try and defend a ferocious Bulldogs forward line. So yeah, this is all about scoring and how we can limit the Dogs. Because the Dogs, the thing that scares me most is the fact that they've reshaped their scoring options. You'd think that without Darcy and Jamari Ugle-Hagan, that they'd be a worse team up forward, and Waitman as well, but now all of a sudden they're just finding goals from everywhere. I look at Gold Coast, Hawthorn, Geelong, Collingwood, even Adelaide. They've all got players inside the top 10 for the Coleman. That is usually what happens with high-scoring teams. Adelaide have 2 in there. But the Dogs, their highest goal scorer is Aaron Norton, who's only got, I think, 2 more than Nate Caddy. Everyone is pitching it around the board. Matt Kennedy has, I think, 10 goals. Lockie McNeil, Riley Sanders, Riley West, James Harms, he kicked 4 in one game. Sam Davidson, Buku Kamas. They've got so many scoring options. I think it makes it even harder to defend them. Because, look, back in the day when it was Ugle-Hagan, Norton, and Jamara, you really had to just limit their scoring. At the start of the year, it was stop Darcy, stop Bulldogs. That is what teams would have been thinking. Now there's too many players to stop. And also, you look at their midfield, because they're pitching in for goals, but it's also just such a potent engine room, as always. It always is. I feel like since I've been properly following footy, the Dogs have always had a great midfield. I like our midfield. Merritt, Durham, Caldwell, that is a great trio. I love that. But yeah, the Dogs, they've got Bontempelli. And as much as I love Merritt, it's hard to compare those two. Then you go down, Liberatore, Ed Richards, Matt Kennedy is so underrated. Tim English in the ruck, they're such a good structured midfield team. They lead the comp quite clearly for centre clearances based on differentials. I believe they're second for total clearances, and they score an unreal amount of goals, from stoppages and centre bounces. They're the best in the comp for scoring from stoppages. It is really hard to defend that sometimes. When you have to go with your 6-6-6 structure and defend a footy coming at you with so much space and pace, it's tough, because we're at our best when we defend because we throw numbers back behind the ball. We're not really allowed to do that from centre bounces. So that is why we're so vulnerable against a team like the Bulldogs. That is why I am more scared about playing the Dogs than pretty much any other team. I'm more concerned going into this game than I was going into Hawthorn and Adelaide and Collingwood. And I think that's why this is a really good test. I think it's good that we're concerned. But the annoying thing about the Bulldogs is the fact that their ball movement is also just elite. Bailey Dale, Ed Richards, these guys really drive the footy out, and it's a big reason why the Dogs are ranked first for moving the footy from D50 to forward 50. Not scoring, but moving the footy there. So the Dogs they're seriously such a good territory side because they've got multiple ways to get the ball in the right areas. They're ranked second for inside 50 differential. We're ranked fifth last, so there's every chance we're just overrun and constantly defending, not just, at stoppages, but on transition as well. Because remember, Marvel's an easy ground to move the footy on. That does favour us a bit, but it also really favours our opponents on Saturday's game. The Dogs are going to be licking their lips. Yeah, when I compare these two teams, it is just hard to find an area of the ground that the Bombers get the upper hand in, or that the Dogs are vulnerable in. I'll say maybe their defence is a tiny bit leaky, but that could also just be a product of their scoring too, kind of like what we see with Adelaide. But it is still on average, conceding less than our defence. So, look, every way you look at this game, and this isn't me being cynical and negative, you guys would know that because I love what we're doing this year. But just about every way I look at this game, I do think the Dogs have us covered. They're a really well-rounded team this year, but they can be beaten. In fact, I look at two different games. Round 4, when the Dogs played Freo, when the Dogs just completely dominated territory, 60% of their forward half, 19 more inside 50s, but it was just sturdy defending and some helpful poor decision-making from the Dogs that got Freo the win. Or there's also the Collingwood game where they really strangled the Dogs, and yes, they had help from the umpires, but it shows you that you not only can beat the Dogs, but do it in different ways. They're obviously not perfect. They're not even the best team in the comp. You can withhold their territory dominance, or you can get on top of them at the contest and strangle them, limiting their opportunities. And look, every team is beatable. Essendon lost in 2000 to the Dogs. But I think in a situation like this, where you have a team who probably should just win the game, it's important for the Dons to be as flexible as possible. Because I've liked the way we've won some games this year, but we're probably going to have to do something pretty new this week, like we did against the Swans. Something a little bit funky up in the coach's box to put Luke Beveridge on the back foot. And I just talked about games from the Bulldogs this year, but I think in a lot of ways, the way to win this game will be really similar to how we won it last year against the Dogs. Because we shut out, first off, we shut their most important players down. Inglis was shut out. Bontempelli was tagged, I think, by Durham. I think Dale might have gotten injured or something from memory. But those three, if they're quiet, and we make the Dogs rely on others for output, they'll still be a strong team, but they'll be less strong than they are with those three firing. But it's a start, And also, last year, from memory, it was all about efficiency. We took our chances, the Dogs didn't. And there's been a bit of that this year with the Dogs. And also, on the flip side, we've been really clean this year in front of goals at times, like the Swans. I talked about that in the preview for the Swans game. It's a big reason why we won the game, because we were so efficient. We took our chances, the Swans didn't. I think when you're coming into a game as the underdog like this, as the strong underdog, against a team that is just better than you, it is all about taking chances, rising to the occasion. You might not be at your best every week, but the only way to ensure you are at your best is by actually giving a crap every week. Effort is contagious, especially under the roof at Marvel, and that is where you guys come in, the crowd, because, that was actually a big part of the win against the Swans. The crowd sounded like it was up and about, drowning out the Swans, And if it's like that again, if the Footscray fans are quiet and we're stamping and making a cauldron of noise, because look, it is the Dogs' home game, but we do have more fans. We should be louder than them. And that will really drive the boys if we get a move on. The Dogs are a team prone to an opposition surge. They have been since, 2020, 2021. And that surge will be really felt if the crowd is against them. So yeah, if you're there with me, be noisy and cheer on the boys. Okay, team news. Both sides are going to be forced into changes, I think. So Latham Vandermeer injured his calf against the Suns. He may play. I think he's a test for the weekend. So if he's fit, he stays in the team because he's a handy player. If not, I think Art Jones makes sense as a replacement. Him or Oscar Baker, maybe. As for us, obviously, Lewis Hayes comes out of the team. Very unfortunate news with his ACL injury being confirmed. Replacing him is interesting. So we may decide to bring in Jaden Laverty as another key defensive option. Or, considering the Dogs' forward line isn't too tall at the moment, maybe we keep it at Mackay and Reed and bring in a ground level player, someone like Zach Johnson or even Matt Guelphy down the other end potentially. I think Laverty is the most logical option, but I wouldn't be surprised to see someone fresh come in. Minimal changes, I think, for this week. I don't think there'd be any omissions for either team, but, I was proven wrong with that last week. Okay, prediction. Look, if we're at our best, we can win. That's just the case with any team in the comp. If you're at your best, if you're lucky enough for your opponents to be not at their best, you can win the game of footy. North Melbourne proved that with the draw. Well, I guess they didn't win, did they? I should say as well, by the way, I am at this game, and for some reason, the Bombers just seem to get the dub when I'm watching live. I'm yet to see them lose this year, live. And 6 of the last 7 games that Felix attended, Essendon won. And that is the only stat you need. This could have been a very short video if I said that earlier. You can lock in the win, actually. Put the house on it. But no, I'm tipping the Dogs. I just think they're a much better side than us. I'd love to get close. For me, that would be enough, I know there are people around getting hyped with our ladder position and our trajectory, but I don't think we're a final side, not this year at least. I think there's a gap between the Dogs and the Bombers. And of course there is. One of these teams believes they can win the flag. The other is building for the future. So yeah, I think the Dogs get this one done. And I think it should be fairly comfortable without being an absolute belting. I just think the way they play footy matches up really well against us. We're suited for some teams. But the Dogs, especially at this stage, they don't feel like one of them. So I'm tipping the Western Bulldogs to get the chocolates. I'm tipping them by 25 points. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm pretty confident that they're just going to be a bit too good. We'll see, though. It's going to be an interesting game of footy. Interesting round of footy as well. There are some fun games to be watching. But yeah, that is that. Cheers for watching, Bomber fans. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. And as always, go Bombers.